Okay, let's get started with our session today. Get complete visibility for faster application troubleshooting. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Pete Stefano. I'll be your host today for our session. I'm a product marketing manager for SolarWinds. I've got responsibility for our AppOptics product, which we'll be talking about today, and our SolarWinds application, a server and application monitor. My partner in crime today is Jared Hensel. He is a senior product marketing manager, and he is a product marketing manager for our database products, specifically Database Performance Monitor. And today, between myself and Jared, we're going to really talk to you about how the combination of AppOptics and DPM really provide the visibility you need to really understand if your application is healthy, and if it isn't, how do you quickly troubleshoot and really get to the end game to where the problem really is, and not waste a whole lot of time in places where the problem might not be, and then you've spent a lot of time going back and forth, whether it's finger pointing, passing tickets from one organization to another. So I think when we're done with this session, you'll get an appreciation for how application-centric monitoring and database-centric monitoring for your application makes a whole lot of sense. So I'm giggling a little bit to myself because I realized when I looked at the agenda, the first bullet was the SolarWinds Portfolio. And, we have over 50 products, and someone who might know SolarWinds is thinking, oh my God, he's really going to go over 54 products. No, I'm not going to do that. I just want to provide some context into what SolarWinds is all about for those of you who aren't aware of SolarWinds. But really, we're going to be focusing on two products: application-centric monitoring with AppOptics, database-centric monitoring with DPM. And we're going to talk about how these things work together. And then we're going to quickly get past all the talking, and we're going to go right into the demonstration. And Jared and I are both going to show you how you can leverage these tools to quickly troubleshoot, pinpoint accurately the issue you're having so you can get it solved very quickly. So again, this is my entire slide to talk about the SolarWinds portfolio. If you're not familiar with SolarWinds, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a lot of products. There's over 50, maybe close to 60 different products. And we break it into different, what we call pillars. There's the network management products, which we're very well known for, our infrastructure management, database performance management, application performance management. We have a service management layer, and then we have our IT security. And these products work in a very traditional legacy on-premise environment, private or public cloud, or quite frankly, in today's environment, for many of you, a hybrid combination of both on-prem, private, public cloud. And it's really important, we actually believe it's very important that the tools you use to manage your environment can handle this very ever-changing, evolving, and complex environment, because it's not just on-prem and cloud, it's on-prem and multi-cloud. Many of you are using multiple cloud implementations along with some of your legacy environment. So if you look at what we're going to talk about today, we're really going to talk about two SaaS-based products from SolarWinds that really help you with infrastructure, database, and application performance monitoring. Before I get into AppOptics, my bad, I wanted to tell you a couple of things. Number one, if this session is going to be successful, it's not because we went through some slides and did some demonstrations. It's if we have engagement. If we get you to say, hey, that inspires a question. So I ask you any time during the session, whether it's through the Q&A or chat, fire in your questions, and we'll try to get them all answered during or really at the end of the session. And if we can't get all your questions answered based on time, we will absolutely follow up. But I really do encourage you to ask any questions you want as we go through this session. So let me first talk about AppOptics. AppOptics full stack APM, infrastructure and application monitoring, built for modern applications, however, can monitor and does monitor an on-premise environment. So whether you're in a traditional data center and you want to monitor from a SaaS or outside the data center, if you want to monitor a combination of your modern applications with legacy applications, AppOptics does that, whether it's monitoring your physical servers, virtual hosts, your containerized environment, and your orchestration to help manage your containers, monitors that entire environment from an infrastructure perspective. When it comes to your custom applications, whether it's Java, PHP, Python, Scala, Ruby, on and on, AppOptics was designed to monitor custom applications, and we'll show you a little bit of that when we get into the demonstrations. And it really is this idea of application centric, and then when Jared talks about the database centric, those two views are very important, and you need to look at these things from those two perspectives to really understand what's going on. So AppOptics will do a great job helping you troubleshoot right down to, if you think about a modern application that could be made up of 10, 20, 50 services, it can do distributed transaction tracing, meaning you can then quickly, through auto instrumentation, traverse a transaction, and every layer of that transaction, every element of that transaction, from the front end web all the way down to the database, it will lay out exactly how much time is taking for that transaction in each layer, and giving you the capability to quickly understand where, if there is a performance issue, which layer of that transaction is causing that. Now, I'm going to show you that a little later on. AppOptics provides a lot of powerful visualizations. Traditionally, a lot of people think of an APM as it's just for developers, it's real geeky. If you don't have an intimate understanding of the application, you can't take advantage of these products. Well, with AppOptics, that's the furthest thing from the truth. Matter of fact, we've built in a lot of automated capability to really provide simple speak answers to what's going on with a specific application, with a transaction. I'm going to show you that. So you've heard of a picture's worth of 1,000 words or 1,000,000 words or whatever. It's absolutely true when time is of the essence. And when you're talking about monitoring these systems, and everyone knows how much more important it is in today's world that applications stay up and running, or if they're up and running, they're performing. And when they're not, it could have a direct impact on the business. So time is of the essence. If there's an issue, you need to understand what that issue is quickly and be able to resolve it. AppOptics gives you the capability in a development environment to do your testing, to get rid of bugs before you go live, to test and validate performances meeting the design criteria, as well, of course, in production for you to be able to monitor, be alerted, and take action. So AppOptics is built and designed, and we're going to talk about how AppOptics can call out things like database issues, but it's from the application-centric perspective. What I want to do now is I'm going to pass it over to Jared to talk a little bit about what we're calling the database-centric perspective with DPM.
Thanks, Pete. So, what's DPM? I don't know if you've heard of SolarWinds before. You've already known we've had a database product in our portfolio. DPM is a newer product that is a SaaS-based product. And so basically, we're able to monitor hundreds to thousands of databases, predominantly in the cloud. It can scale to on-prem. But since it is SaaS-based, we tend to obviously gravitate towards more of the SaaS-based customer, those that are running databases in the cloud. The databases that DPM supports, they are more of the open source friendly databases, the MySQL, Postgres, MongoDB, Aurora, and Redis. So again, we've already got the majority of the databases that your APM developers or application developers that are using APM solutions are gravitating towards. So again, the features that you're going to see during the demo, it is designed to be developer friendly, that we're going to show you things before and after, what's new, what's changed. because we know that a significant portion of developers go and go about their day. They change code, deploy code, but they may not be privy to or even have a thought about what is it impacting the database. I may be loading more items into the shopping cart, or we're trying to change the checkout process or whatever it is, but really without seeing what is going on in the database. And from the database point of view, you're kind of left with some blind spots. And when I'm referring to the database point of view, how Pete's going to show his thing is you're looking at a particular transaction. Well, that database could be housing multiple databases, or it could be housing multiple applications, or it could be doing backup or something else. So again, if you're looking from an APM point of view, you're just looking at, okay, here's this transaction coming in. I'm trying to buy a T-shirt or whatever it is, but the database may be doing other things at the same time. So your your T-shirt transaction seems slow. Oh, it's a database issue. Well, let's see what else the database is doing, besides that transaction. So it is flipping it around, and it's not really looking at the transaction as opposed to the query coming in to serve up the data to check inventory or whatever it is. So it really helps spot those changes, see what's going on, allow you to have productive dialogue between developers, DBAs, site reliability engineers. So again, those people that are, hey, I'm neither of these people. I just need to make sure that the website is running super fast. So it really does help facilitate those needs. And you'll see during the demo how we go through. We can eliminate some problems. We can spot some problems we didn't see. We could see how things are adversely affecting one another. So again, that's where DPM plus AppOptics gives you both sides of that coin, saying, hey, here's from the application side, here's from the database side, here's how we can optimize both, or here's how can I eliminate some troubleshooting steps or troubleshooting diagnostics over here to go over there. So you'll see during the demo, again, how this works, but really that is where DPM comes in. It, again, though, can also be used to just troubleshoot commercial applications. Obviously, you have less impact on what you can do with a commercial application. If it's using an open source backend, you can find that, hey, maybe the GL report is taking a long time in the accounting system, but you really can't go manipulate the accounting system where you can with a custom app that you're monitoring with AppOptics. So with that, I'll pass it back to Pete.
All right. So before we get into the demonstration, again, both of these products, they're SaaS-based. Okay, and between the two of them, you really do get comprehensive infrastructure, database, and application performance monitoring. Okay, and they both provide full stack visibility. Again, on-prem, cloud, hybrid, open source database, custom applications, infrastructure, and both of these products provide out of the box real-time database, application metrics, infrastructure metrics. We're going to show you that here in a few moments. And as I mentioned earlier, and I can't bang the drum on this enough, and as IT professionals on this call, I'm sure you'd agree that how quickly can I accurately pinpoint where the problem is, okay, regardless of where it is across the stack. And taking these two different approaches, like AppOptics does a great job. I'm going to show you an example where it's going to say, this transaction, by far, is primarily the time on this transaction was taken up by the database. Does that mean the database was a problem, or that's just where the time is being spent? Maybe it's bad coding, and we're going to get into all that. But being able to take that perspective, and the other thing Jared just said about AppOptics, for that application, for that set of services, is going to call out an issue. But what about all the other databases or all the other applications that are hitting a specific database? How can that be potentially impacting? Maybe it is the database, not because of how much your application is hitting on the database, but there's a bunch of these other applications that you're not even aware of. So having both of those perspectives and being able to really provide optimum observability into your application, you're going to see how together these products really will maximize your availability And as with all SolarWinds products, you've probably heard this before if you're familiar with SolarWinds. It's about keeping it simple, powerful, and affordable, and that is true with both of these products as well. Well, look, enough talking. Why don't we do this? Why don't we go over and let me start to show you something. I'm going to do a demonstration for you, and then I'm going to have Jared take over and dive into DPM. So what I'm showing you here, just so you understand, this is a hotel booking site. And it would be great because these are 5-star hotels for $10 a night. So if you get to the site, the problem is it's our demo site. It's not real. But we use this to demonstrate the product. So as I go through and show AppOptics, it is monitoring this application, which is it's a real application. So let me start by just showing you the home screen for AppOptics. What you see here, just to kind of give you an idea, this is a way to do a real quick elevator tour. What you see up here is your services. This is your application monitoring. It's showing you a handful of the 11 services that we are using. And by the way, those 11 services, we're talking about one application, and this is just one application, which is that hotel booking application. It's made up, it's a modern application made up of 11 independent services. Then here you've got your host. This is your infrastructure monitoring. We'll get into that. On the right, it just shows you all the different plugins that have been implemented for our demonstration system. The minute you drop in one of these plugins, it starts collecting metrics. It auto-populates dashboards that come out of the box. So it's all about getting you up and running quickly. I won't go into the alerts here. Obviously, alerting is not about clicking into the alert system and looking at how an alert was triggered. Alerting is all about getting a Slack message or pager duty or an SMS saying, hey, something's wrong. And of course, AppOptics does all those things because it's letting you know. It's critical to let you know when there is an issue. And then later on, I'll talk about some of our dashboards, but this is kind of like the home screen. If you see here to the left, it's this simple with AppOptics. You've got your home. This is just basically a splash screen, but you've got your application monitoring, then you've got your infrastructure monitoring icons, and your dashboards, metrics, and alerts. I mean, it's that simple. Let me start really quickly by showing you some of the options for infrastructure. And this could be, by the way, you can either have a container list or a host list because look at your integrations. You can group, you can filter your hosts by a variety of things as well as containers. What I'm going to do here is I went to the containers and I did a map instead of a list. Okay, and in this case, using Docker CPU, because these are all Docker containers, I set some thresholds. So this is a small number. What is it? Like 60, it's 77 containers. This could be 100, this could be 500 containers. But I've got a visualization right away of my infrastructure, all my containers or my hosts. And I see I've got some in red, and I can click on that. So right away, I could use these visualizations to understand where I might have issues. Again, the visualization is great, but as you would expect, proactive alerting is also key to AppOptics in just about any system. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to drill into one of our infrastructures. So this AO Demo 1 is one of our hosts. And this is a host drill down. You can see here, as you would expect, how much CPU, memory, disk, network, etc. What's the server load been looking like. And you can see here, this shows the last 6 hours. I can say, hey, how does it look the last 24 hours? I can change the time frame. But the other thing that shows me on this host, it very quickly says, hey, here are the services that are running on that host, and here's how they're performing. I actually can look at the processes that are running on the hosts. I can get information about the plugins and containers. I'm going to click here in the host details. This gives you even more details on the physical host. So lots of information. And by the way, I can very easily go to any one of these and create a dashboard. So I can click on any one of these charts and start building dashboards in moments. So I've got the capability to drill down at that level. I've also got the capability to click here. If you notice on this bottom right, it says View Logs. With our sister products, Logley, SolarWinds Logley, I click on that and it's going to take me to all of the log lines associated with this host. And it's all done. You don't have to do any implementation other than having Logley installed and having AppOptics installed. Now let me go over to the application side real quick. What you see here is a map of the services that are running. Now again, this last 24 hours, and just let me flip over first to the list. I mentioned earlier the hotel application I'm showing you is made up of these services. As you see here, you got your front-end web tier, you've got an administration panel, your booking service, your pricing service. So each of these are individual services, and each of these are being monitored. So here's a way to look at it from a list perspective. I can see things like response time, requests, error issues, and I can drill in from here. We've recently added this service map that not only can you get the same information by clicking into them, but now I can see the relationship between the different services. I can see dependencies on databases, caches, other domains, which really becomes important when I have multiple applications. I've got 5, 10 applications that might be vying for the same database, or they might be using common services. And it's hard sometimes for one team to understand how another team or another application could be impacting them. By having this visualization, especially for larger companies, it makes it easy for me to understand if there are other applications that are vying for the same resources, which could have a lot of implications on performance. Now, the other thing I can do on the list, I can click on that list, or I could click on any one of these. Now, you notice the booking service and web tier are in red because there's some errors. So I can literally just click into that, and from here it's going to give me some of that information I showed on the list. But here I can go into the hosts that are supporting that service. I can go into the service details. I can go right to the transactions that that booking service is part of. And I won't do that now, but there's a lot I can do, whether I use the map or I use the services list. But this is how you drill into the applications within AppOptics. So what I'm showing you here now is this detail view of a service. And there's lots of great information in here, HTTP status codes and methods, error rates, and top transactions. But this can be a little more complicated depending on who you are. What we've instituted recently is this great service level summary. So in plain speak, it tells me, hey, the following host is seeing a high request volume compared to other services on that host. It's telling me the service is spending most of its time making queries to the database, to the MongoDB database. So without me having a whole lot of knowledge of the application right away, it's giving me very simple guidance on where there might be some issues. We've also built something that's roughly related to the 4 golden signals of application monitoring, and that's response time or latency, request rate, you've got average CPU, kind of saturation, and you've got your error rate. And I can look at all of this information, and you see here it defaults to a week ago, but I could change this, and what it tells me is I can say, hey, is what's happening now an anomaly, or is it something that I've been experiencing on a regular basis, so I can compare what's going on right now with this service to what's been going on for the last month. Very powerful visual capability. Again, I could still drill into the details, and I can look into it and get into a lot more information, but that summary view really makes a difference. Okay, the next thing I wanted to do is show you here whether I'm looking at the overview or I'm looking at the detail. In the last 24 hours, there's been 757,000 transaction requests, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on traces, on the transaction traces, and it's going to give me this heat map. And what I'm going to do is I've put a box around an outlier. Because, hey, what's going on here? This thing is taking over 2 seconds long. So when I click on that, again, something we've done that's new is we provide what we call a transaction summary. So now this is saying for this transaction that we just called out, it took 2.21 seconds. 2.19 seconds was based on database call. So this changes. This could be remote calls, it could be local code, database, depending on where most of the time is being spent. So if you're having an issue, like for example, this is a transaction that should take less than a second, there's an issue here, it's telling you right out of the bat, 99% of this request duration can be attributed to the following database calls, and you can see here it shows the queries. Now, is this a database problem or is this a really bad coding issue, right? We don't know that at this point, but definitely this says here's something we've identified and now we need to go and interrogate that even further. Now, just to show you with AppOptics, this is a summary screen, but we also have the details. You got to think of AppOptics as a tool that can provide a very high-level status summary, and you can drill down and drill down and drill down all the way to literally the poor performing line of code. So what we have here in this same transaction, okay, is we're looking at the detail of each layer of the transaction from the front end Ruby all the way through to the Java code down to the database. And you'll notice it tells you how much time it's taken each step of the way to get, in this case, 3 second. And if you look here at this Mongo database, that's where most of the time is being spent. Because if you look down here, it says between the last layer and the MongoDB, it's 3.4 seconds. If you go up to the next layer, it's just another 5 milliseconds. And then same thing with Java. Again, you've got this information, but let's just say the concern was more in the application. Well, I'm going to click on Java, and then I'm going to click on one of those Java requests, and you'll see here, I actually have the code profile. I've got actually the lines of code that were executing during this transaction. Now, this wasn't an issue with regards to the application code, but with AppOptics, whether it's HTTP issues, whether it's code issues, whether it's database, it's going to be very clear whether the summary is calling it out, or if you want to drive even deeper in, looking at something like what we have here, which is a waterfall transaction trace. Now, another thing you can do with AppOptics, again, I mentioned it earlier with the logs for the infrastructure, we do the same thing here. So think about how many layers to this transaction there are. And there can be logs that are being created for every one of these layers. Well, one of the challenges when you're using log management tools is the search. Getting all of the logs necessary so you can do the troubleshooting. Well, this is a suspect transaction. All I do here is click on this search logs, and what it's going to do, it's opening up Logley, which is a sister log management tool. What we've done is we've appended the transaction ID to every one of those logs being created across every one of those layers. And now what we've basically done, one click, and now I'm looking at every single log entry, regardless of what type of log was being created through that transaction. So now I don't have to worry about looking at, well, here's one log entry that is associated with the transaction. Let me see all the ones before it. Let me see the ones after it. In one click, I have all of the log lines associated with that transaction. Again, another way to speed the troubleshooting. Okay, one thing I wanted to show you real quickly before I move it on to Jared was the dashboards. Okay, and what's really important to know with AppOptics, and I know I've said it several times, is what are the things you get out of the box, right? And it's real easy to install the infrastructure agent, the application libraries, and then your plugins, and you're up and running. For every one of these things you install, you're going to get a bunch of these dashboards out of the box. So for example, if you're running Docker containers, this is an out-of-the-box dashboard. How many containers are running, how many have been terminated, what are using the top memory, CPU. You can see there are lots of information here. And again, the capability to quickly modify these existing dashboards or create new dashboards is really simple. So with AppOptics, what I've shown you is just real quickly the capability to monitor infrastructure and alert on it, monitor the application, and in both cases, whether it's visualizations, maps, or the service maps that make it easy to understand the relationships between the services or understand if there's an issue with any specific part of the infrastructure. The capability to drill down all the way to the actual code. Exception tracking, I didn't talk about that very much, but really call out the errors that are associated with an application transaction. All of this is set up to help you get to the end and get to the root cause. Now, as I pass it over to, sorry, let me go here. As I pass it over to Jared to talk about the DPM, I want to just talk about database here. So this is an example where it's our demo system, right? And in this case, it's not the database, right? The issue, we're spending all the time in the database because we're making too many calls to satisfy a query. But this is the kind of information where the combination between having that database-centric and the application-centric together can validate what you're seeing and then put your energy in the right place. So with that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pass the ball over to Jared, and he's now going to take you through how DPM can help you troubleshoot your applications.
All right, thank you, Pete. All right, boom, you should be seeing my screen. You know, what's ironic is, as Pete pointed out, was that demo environment, that 5-star hotel for $5, was completely designed to highlight AppOptics. And I know when they first did it, they basically terminated the issue again at the database layer, but it was ironic because once we put DPM on there a couple of years later, we're like, hey, let's expand this story and see how we see it from a database point of view. So I'm now logged into DPM, and right away we have basically, we're using Google's golden signals of what's going on the database. And I've got a 3-hour window selected here. I just chose it right here. So I can see that my latency is starting creeping up a little bit. My throughput has really cranked up. Same with my concurrency. And same with my CPU. And so now down here, I'm looking at more of the health stuff. This is more this is database, my, latency, throughput, concurrency, error rate. So I have no errors. That's great. And then this is my host. So again, I can quickly see that, okay, hey, I'm seeing something as well. But my first thing I may do is actually try to, okay, I'm looking, let's expand this out. Okay, it looked pretty good before this morning. Is this something normal? Oh, okay, now I went to 4 days, so I can quickly see, to latch on to what Pete was saying, is I can definitely see that there's a trend here. This is really easy to spot when I started going through there and going, okay, again, it still may be the database, but already I have signs of, I don't think it's a resource issue. I don't know, because most of the time it's doing its job just fine and dandy. I would want to look at that particular time interval and see really what's going on. So I'm going to go back to 3 hours. Again, this is the high overview. I can come in here and start searching by a database type, a host type, anything along those lines. I'll show that more later in the demo, but this is looking at the high overview. So if I come in here, another view is, again, I can totally see at 9 o'clock, oh my goodness, CPU started spiking up. I can add more widgets to this screen, but I can start seeing what are driving my queries. What queries are going through the roof. And one of the queries that Pete highlighted was this booking query. Again, I can come and see here that it is by far the most time-consuming query over the last 3 hours. And again, I can see that one. I can see the promotion.find, and then really things get smaller and smaller and really start tailing off, that basically these other queries are not consuming anything. And again, since I'm looking at this across all my databases, I'm looking at things beyond just this application Pete was looking at. If I saw, hey, my number one query was invoicing, blah, 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 and then booking.com, and they're on the same server or same database instance, okay, well, Pete, I'd love to blame you for booking having 12, 13, 500 requests. Yeah, it's not good, but there's something else that's worse that's hammering this. But, right now, the requests that Pete was highlighting and the queries that Pete was highlighting in his demo are the number ones in my database as well. So again, I've now started eliminating things from it, going, what other noise is happening on these host instances, things like that. Is accounting doing something? Is this not even transaction? We're just doing some sort of reconciliation, whatever. Again, I can now start seeing that same query in this different view. But as I pointed out earlier, we can do time interval changes here. So again, I can go, okay, what did this particular query look like 3 hours ago? And here it is. So I can see that this query looked like this, and it has jumped over 5,000%. By far one of the largest queries jumping. And again, I could see that promotion jump too, but the total amount of queries and latency, it's a lot less. So I want to start drilling into this query. Now, we'll have a little bit of issues here, and I'll show you why. Again, it's demo data, but I can come in here now. I can start drilling into the query. I can see the total time spent, the count. Okay, why did it go crazy? All of a sudden, Pete, we were just talking that it was really minimal, a couple hundred times, if that, it was, hey, 23 times. And then all of a sudden it's 1.8 thousand, and 1.9 thousand. So it's going crazy. I can see that it's not on multiple hosts. So again, demo data, fictitious website, ideally you may see 4 or 5 hosts running this query. Obviously depending on your distributed environment, you can see additional data here, but right now it's only on one box. So again, I can kind of drill deeper into that box if I needed to. I can click here and start drilling into the box. I'm going to go back to screen now. I can see tags. So again, if you're working with a development team that is tagging the queries, you can start seeing, hey, this is the checkout process, this is accounting, this is booking. Gives you another way to start sorting your data. Again, I may not care where that query is, what host it's on, what instance it's in. I just want to find the Ross booking, query, anything that's tagged that, anything along those lines. So again, I can see the whole query here. Now, where we've run into some issues is this particular instance of Mongo is super old. So again, I'll show you in a minute what we can pull in with newer versions of Mongo, newer versions of Postgres, things like that. But ultimately, in that query, I'm looking at a bunch of different data. I can go, what are new queries? Again, okay, what are the new queries that have happened in the last 3 hours? Okay, nothing new has happened. That's great. We're not really pushing any code. Nothing in 4 hours. Again, I'll show you on the other demo, because this is a fictitious website and all of that, we're not pushing any code. But you've got the ability to quickly create dashboards. Again, this is all out of the box stuff where I can come and see the CPU usage, MongoDB. So I can look at, here's a pre-canned stuff for all my MongoDB hosts. I can sort by one host. I can sort by all my hosts. Again, I can come in here and really highlight here. Here's the overall performance of my MongoDB instance. As Pete pointed out, part of it's just the hardware health, so I can look at the CPU and disk utilization of my servers, anything along those lines. But back to the point that what Pete was showing was by far I'm showing this query is the most. Let's change this back to a little more respectable time frame, 3 hours. By far, it has the craziest pattern. I mean, it jumped through the roof. I can do the time comparison. I can see the count. I can see the latency jump up. I can basically, let's change this time frame to 1 hour. Actually, come over here. Let's go to 10 minutes. And now I can see my count dropped way back down. My latency is back down. So again, this is much more in line with a well-performing system where 3 hours ago it was not. So again, could I put more resources on the server? Sure, but why would I want to do that when 99% of the day it runs absolutely fine? Let's go look at that 5% of the day where it's performing poorly. Now, I'm going to hop into a different demo. This one's just a little more robust. This is our public demo, or not public demo, but this has got more hosts on there. So again, same information. I can come into my profiler and start, again, looking at all my hosts. I'm going to search, again, though, I'm going to type in type equals Mongo, because we're already talking about Mongo servers. I can apply that. So again, now I'm looking at, again, same view as before. This just happens to be running a newer version of Mongo. So now when I click into this query, again, I can see this on multiple hosts. I can see the query data. I can actually now click on a particular one and I can see sample text. I can see explain plans. I can see index data. So again, this is now where I'm having better conversations with my DBAs, my developers. So I'm actually giving them more information to, what is going on with the explain plan when this is coming in. Again, allowing them to troubleshoot, make changes, anything along those lines. So again, this is just a newer version of Mongo. The older version that their demo is running doesn't pull this in there. But again, if I came in here and let's go back to my summary screen, apply, profiler, we're going to add, again, so I've got custom demos dashboards here where we've created. Here's all my MySQL. Let's just go look at MySQL, type equal MySQL, hit apply here. So now again, I'm looking at my #1 queries on there. You can come in here, same thing. I can pull in multiple database types, just like Pete was pulling in multiple different applications they were running or multiple services. I can pull in multiple database types. So again, I can come in here. Now I'm looking at MySQL queries. I can pull in this. Again, now I'm seeing the explain plan for the MySQL query. Again, having this conversation with myself and Pete, now I can dig in deeper and say what's going on. But in the example that Pete showed, I would basically say, hey, this is not a database issue because 99% of the day, it runs just fine. I don't really know, when we have latency issues, it's because you're sending a crazy amount of queries per request. Why is that? Is there a way to streamline that function to, hey, I'm going to put in one query, one request is going to pull back all this information as opposed to chunking it up, things along those lines. So, it's just a very powerful tool to allow you to, get on the same page. Again, you can come in here. These are some charts we've created again. We've got CloudWatch. So if you're running your information on, or your infrastructure on AWS, you can pull in CloudWatch information already all in here. We've got, golden signals for MySQL again. So these are things that we're trying to do that bridge the gap between somebody writing code, somebody using an APM, and it basically, points in that black box to, well, here it's a database issue. Let's go look at the database. Let's see what else is going on with the database. Let's look at this database over time before we rush to judgment and say it's a database issue. It could very well be. I can see that, hey, there are multiple queries on here. We're just looking at this one transaction. We need to focus on the broader scope of what's going on this server. And things along those lines. Again, just really simplifies getting people on the same page. I've used the expression, the opposite side of the coin, where if you're just looking at one side, you're going to be like, hey, I'm looking at the head side of the coin. This is it. This is it. This is it. It's definitely on the back side without really knowing what's on the back side of that. Is it the actual database itself? Is it the host? Is it another application? What is going on? And it's great, though, to have these side by side to really show what's going on, eliminate gaps, anything along those lines. And again, you can create your alerts in here, your charts, anything in here. I can come into my health. I can see best practices. Well, let's go look at the health on Pete's system. Oh, well, besides MongoDB being super old, there's a bunch of things we actually recommend that you do on here, so we can basically, before we even optimize that one particular query and see what's going on, there's some things we need to do on the server side beforehand. So again, pulling in those best practices, allowing you to tune your overall system health before actually digging into a particular query or request or things along those sides. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Pete to see if we got any questions that came in. Holy smokes, there's lots of questions.
Sorry, I was on mute. As we get ready to go through the Q&A, there is a poll that we're going to be throwing out there just in case you guys would like to follow up with us. So there's just two quick questions while we start with the Q&A. I'll start with one of the questions. One of the questions was about a number that I was sharing And I'll do this real quick here. Can you make me the presenter again, Jared?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to do that. Do you want to change? Yes. Boom. Pete is
there. We go.
Privileges.
All right. I just want to show you this real quick. Earlier on, there was a question like I had mentioned 1.8 or 1.78, where it came from. So just when I was showing this transaction, if you'll notice, it showed the queries that were making up to 2.19 seconds. What I had mentioned was 13 calls from this first query took up 1.78 seconds. So that's where that number came from. And that was really the big time difference on the query. The next one that took 14 calls took up just a little under a half a second. But if you, again, the end game here was it called out on this transaction that of the 2.21 seconds, 2.19 was from database calls. And when we went into that. So just to answer that question, that's where that came from.
Well, and I know Pete and I, we actually walked through this yesterday, and in that particular exact same screen, we did it 2 hours earlier. There were 300 or 400 calls, so it was like, okay, hey, you're now beating the database up pretty good, and so the latency went up. So, right now it's a respectable number, may not be where you want it, but 2 hours ago, those same requests were putting in hundreds of queries back in there. So it was like, okay, what is going on? Why do we need to put in 500 requests in there?
Right, and just so everyone knows, that was for the demo system, right? So around 9 o'clock every morning and around 3:15, we cranked up a bunch of these calls to spike CPU to get the calls going. So, but you understand the concepts of how this can help you, whether it's a bunch of calls, whether it's slow queries. But that's where, to really get that next level of knowledge, the combination of both the infrastructure and application details with the database-centric details gives you the best full picture. There was another question, Jared, around DPM.
Wait, which one?
Yeah, with regard to MS SQL Server.
Correct. As of right now, DPM is on the open source side. So again, your Aurora, MySQL, Postgres. I mean, obviously we have DPA as Microsoft SQL. I don't know if it's going to get into DPM. I mean, we feel confident that we already have good coverage with DPA. That is a solid product. But again, the databases that DPM are doing are obviously open source, but they tend to be more cloud. I don't want to say cloud friendly, but obviously that's probably changing with, Amazon and AWS and SQL managed instance and things along those lines. But as of right now, MS SQL is not a supported database type in DPM. Unfortunately.
Right. Now, to support the second part of that question, AppOptics does have a MS SQL Server plugin, so you can monitor SQL Server with AppOptics. It's not nearly going to give you the depth and, again, the perspective you get with DPM, but depending on what you're looking to monitor with regards to, queries, number of writes and reads and performance, that plugin will satisfy that within AppOptics. Let's see here. We answered that question. There was one question with regards to the transaction tracing on what do you need to do to make that work. And, it's auto-instrumented. It's funny. You'll look, and there'll be certain things you'll be monitoring where you're putting plugins to monitor, specific application. Well, there is a list of components that AppOptics will automatically identify and then provide that in the transaction trace. So there's really not much you need to do. You need to install the application libraries for the applications you're going to monitor. And that's pretty much it. And it's auto-instrumented. It's a little bit different than some others where quite a bit of configuration work might need to be done, but not with AppOptics. It's pretty much straightforward. All right, I know we're running a little bit late here. There was a question about progress. The one thing I will mention, and I think this was a SAM customer, whether it's with SAM or AppOptics, you have the capability, a very powerful capability. If there is a component or an element we don't include out of the box, we have custom metrics in AppOptics that make it very easy to basically grab information from just about anything that you can grab information from. If it's got an API, those metrics can be brought in and it can be alerted on side by side, do all the things you can do with AppOptics. And quite frankly, as a SAM customer, you've got some of that flexibility too, whether it's through the API Polar integration or some of the other capabilities to bring and create custom templates. So if you'd like to go deeper into that with regards to your question on Progress OpenEdge, there are multiple ways we can help you get that monitoring and alerting going, whether it be with AppOptics or SAM. All right.
Yeah, I was going to say I want to say between the two products, I think we have 7 or 8 of the top 10 databases according to DB Engines. I know SAM, DPA's got 4 of the top 5. DPM has got 3 of the top 5. I don't know where Progress OpenEdge is on there, but again, like as Pete pointed out, between the API ability in SAM, putting an agent on the box to look at process services, anything along those lines, pulling that all in from in there, I think you can get a fairly significant amount of data, not as much as we may be if like, hey, that's a supported database and we're able to pull some other granular data. But I don't know where it is, but I feel pretty confident between DPA and DPM. We've got broad coverage of the major databases, but I know there's, it seems like thousands of databases out there, but unfortunately this is not one where we have an out-of-the-box template. But, as Pete pointed out, though, we've got the ability to create our own templates, multiple ways to get that data in there. So hopefully one of those methods would suffice.
All right. Well, look, first of all, thank you all for hanging in with us. I know we're running over. We wanted to keep this to a total of 45 minutes. On the screen now, you see a couple of URLs for the AppOptics and the Database Performance Monitor. If you want to get more information, again, you have the polling question. I want to thank everyone today. Jared, thank you very much, my partner in crime. I hope you found this valuable. And don't be a stranger. Please reach out to your SolarWinds rep or any of the contact points that you have, and hopefully this sheds some light on how you can use both these SaaS-based products to troubleshoot your applications. With that, I'm going to end our session. Thank you very much. You all have a great day.